Okay, we are going to start with tonight's class. We're focused on chapter 10. Tonight's class is dedicated by Harriet Cohen. Thank you, Harriet, in memory of her friend Gary Romanek. Am I saying that correctly?
Jerry Romanek.
Jerry Romanek, who passed away last night. May her memory be for a blessing. Do you have her Hebrew name?
We just did a Tahara. But no, on the way home from the Tahara, I was like, oh, I should have gotten her Hebrew name, and then I got distracted.
And if you get it later,
I'll get it.
me. But that's very fresh. Wow. So may this bring comfort to her friends and family and joy to her soul. Do you want to tell us something about her?
Yes. She was 98 years old and a very wise and loving and inspiring person. I met her many years ago when I was doing some presentations with some people from Anshe Torah, and we kind of hit it off. And then her husband died after 74 years, and she joined the grief support group, and just always had this beautiful wisdom, a lovely smile, and was just there to talk to any of the people in the group. And I got a call Saturday night that she was in the final stages and had the opportunity to go spend some time with her yesterday afternoon and to thank her on behalf of the grief support group and myself for all the profound ways that she had impacted my life and other people's lives. Just
Wow.
little bitty thing, but a big impact.
Well, you should. Hashem should comfort you. He's the only one who could comfort in these kind of situations. Tonight's class, before we get into tonight's class, last week, chapter 9 was a very pivotal chapter in, not last, whatever, our last class together. Chapter 9 was a very pivotal chapter where kind of all of these background pieces of information we've been talking about in Tanya, they all came to a head as we discussed the battle. You know, now that we understand who all the players are, now we understand what all the elements are within us and outside of us. Chapter 9 spoke about the battle, this big ongoing battle that is raging within us on a regular basis. You know, you ever feel a tension, like a pull sometimes, like I really want to do this, but I really want to do that, or I know I should do this, but I really don't want to do it. I really want to do something else. Of course you do. If you feel that, that means you're alive. The Tanya says that is the definition of life, constantly feeling pulled in different directions. And the key here is that at any moment, hi, Lorraine, at any moment, I could only say or actively think or act upon one of these. I really want to do A, I really want to do B. I could only do one of them at a time. I could do A and then B, B and then A. I can never do both at the same time. Only one of them, only one force is sitting in the driver's seat, so to speak. It's like saying there's one car. I want to drive to California and my friend wants to drive to Connecticut. You know, try to compromise. You can't compromise. Either the car is going this way or the car is going that way, or it's going this way, that way, and the whole car is going crazy. But it could only be pointed in one direction at a time. And that's what the Tanya told us in the last chapter, that at the end of the day, I could only be expressing one of these souls at any given moment. And there's a constant battle because each of these souls wants to be the winner. not just the winner for the moment, the winner forever. Each of these souls wants to not only get its way in the moment, but it wants to A, to dominate, B, it wants to be the only one dominating. It doesn't want to share the dominion with the other soul power. C, it also wants the other one to get on board. It's not just the godly soul says, all right, I want to pray. I want the animal soul to come pray with me. I want all the excitement that you have for other things. I want you to shift that towards holy things. And the animal soul says, I don't want to just, be having fun when I'm having fun. Also, when you're thinking about God, I want you to be having fun. I want you to bring all of your holiness and all your spirituality and all of that energy to do what I want to do. And that's the constant battle that's raging inside of us. And it's actually the Tanya compares it to a battle of two kings. And the reason it compares it to kings is because in war, do you ever hear that in the end, the two countries, the two kings, they just compromised. They said, we'll both share, the kingship. Of course not. I want to be in charge and only my country in charge. I want to take down all the flags of the other country and, lift up all our flags and change the anthem and change everything else because I want my country to be in charge. And that's kind of how the souls feel about this battle. Last chapter did not discuss any results. Like, so what happens? Who wins, And that's what chapter 10 starts talking about. Now, it's interesting. I'm excited to study it. I've only skimmed through it. I just bought a new edition of the Tanya with the commentary of, it just slipped my mind. Steinsaltz. And those of you who are familiar with some of the Jewish books translated to English, Rabbi Steinsaltz was what? Say it again.
Adin Steinsaltz?
Yes, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz or Rabbi Adin Even Israel. He was actually the first one to translate the Talmud, to fully translate the Talmud. That's what he's best known for. He was a great, great thinker, modern day thinker. He just passed away a few years ago. So he wrote a commentary on the Tanya, and coming from a very interesting perspective because he's not someone who grew up within Chabad. He didn't grow up studying Tanya. He came to it as someone who had already, studied a lot of academia and a real intellectual. And then he came and he started studying Tanya. So he has a very fascinating outlook on it. But anyway, one thing that I gleaned from the introduction is he says, everyone talks about Tanya and it's like, wow, it's like life transforming. And you open up the book and you're waiting for the wow, like you're waiting to have your jaw drop while you say, oh my. It says, it's not necessarily going to happen. The Tanya is working its way towards giving you a very specific life perspective and a way of looking at the world and at yourself so that ultimately you live a much more enriched life. So as you're studying the Tanya and going through it, you're not saying, wow, oh my goodness, jumping out of your seat. But slowly, as you think about these teachings and as you keep going through it, you step back and you say, I started looking at things very differently. I see my life differently. I see myself differently. It's not in the moment necessarily that you feel it. So I thought that was worth pointing out because I know for myself, I'm always looking for the wow. And it was interesting how he phrased it, that it's not, the wow is not in every word. The wow is when you step back and see wow, look at this picture that we just painted here. That I digress. Okay, chapter 10. Let's talk about who wins this battle. What happens, right? To appreciate what goes on in chapter 10, we kind of have to go back a little bit to the very beginning of the Tanya, chapter 1. If you remember, chapter 1 began, the Tanya is trying to give us an outlook on life, our mission in life, our purpose in life, where we're trying to go. So in chapter 1, it begins by telling us what happens when a soul descends into this world. Before a person's born, their soul is made to take an oath, and the oath is, I shall be a tzaddik, I shall not be a rasha. I will be a righteous person, I will not be an evil person. And the second part of the oath is, even if the whole world tells me that I'm a righteous person, I'm still going to think of myself as a Russia, as an evil person. And over throughout that chapter and over the next bunch of chapters, we're kind of trying to unpack this so that we get a better picture of what are these levels, because what are we actually trying to achieve? Are we actually trying to be a tzaddik? Is it possible to be a tzaddik? Is that, what does it mean to be a tzaddik? So that's kind of where we started. And now in chapter 10, we're going to touch upon that again, because chapter 10 is going to say, all right, let's look at the first option. The first option is I have this battle going on inside me and I emerge as a tzaddik. What does it mean that I emerge as a tzaddik? That I give the keys to the godly soul, the keys to the car, and the godly soul is in full control of the vehicle being me. Meaning all of my thoughts and all of my speech and all of my actions are 100% godly all the time. Not only are my thought, speech, and action godly all the time, but actually I've managed to overcome any emotions of the animal soul that I don't even feel them anymore. The battle was so strong and the victory was so great that the godly soul managed to literally put the animal soul to sleep and make it quiet forever. So the tzaddik goes through life without any desires for physicality, without any interest in self. Remember we said that according to the Tanya, the animal soul is responsible not only for evil, but also for anything that's not holy. The tzaddik is not interested in anything unholy. All that interests the tzaddik is pure holiness and godliness. I know this brings up a lot of questions. I want to read it inside, and then we'll start dissecting it and trying to understand, okay, like we said last time we said, this is the Tanya described as the Superman or the Superwoman. What is this? And then, is it attainable? The short answer is no, not quite attainable for most people. And if so, why are we even talking about it? So let's look inside. I'm going to pull up chapter 10. Okay. Chapter 10 begins, when a person causes his divine soul to prevail over the animal soul, and when he wages war against the animal soul to the extent that he banishes and eradicates its evil from the left part of his heart, which is in last chapter we described, that's kind of the abode, so to speak, of the animal soul. As it is written, you shall eradicate the evil from your midst. If a person has done this, so here the Tanya says, so this person, they've gotten rid of any negativity inside them, but they haven't transformed that negativity to good. It's just, he got rid of any negativity. He kind of put the other side completely to sleep. It's there, but it's just in a deep dormant sleep. The evil has nevertheless not actually been converted to good. He is called an incomplete tzaddik, or also a tzaddik who knows evil, meaning that some vestige of evil still lingers within him on the left part of his heart, except that it finds no expression, not even in evil desires, because by reason of its minuteness, it's subjugated and nullified by the good and cannot therefore be sensed. Hence, the tzaddik, may imagine that he has driven it out and that it has disappeared. In truth, however, had all the evil in him departed and disappeared, it would have been converted to actual good. So, in other words, what the Tanya is telling us here, this guy, or woman, but, we're just talking about this generic person, the tzaddik. The tzaddik is someone who has completely won their war. They won their war. They overpowered that evil inclination inside them. They overpowered that animalistic desire inside them. And they are now basically a completely godly being. They have no interest in doing anything that's not holy. One definition I heard for it is think of someone who is consistently inspired. Those two words. When someone's inspired, they're like on a high. They want to do the right thing. They don't want to do anything else. This person is always on that high. They're always so inspired. They have no interest in anything that's common. Like the average person, says, you know, let's say, I don't know, Shabbat morning, I really want to go to services. Wake me up for services. I don't want to miss them this week, right? Why is it that I never have to tell someone, wake me up for lunch? I don't want to miss a meal today? Because my body's going to wake me up. I'm in tune with my body. I'm not as in tune with spirituality. So I kind of need someone to wake me up. I need to be reminded that the holy thing is happening. For the tzaddik, it's the exact opposite. The tzaddik will always be aware of when it's time to do something holy. The tzaddik may need to be reminded to eat or to take care of something that's not, directly holy for reason of holiness. Like when you're really inspired, let's say you're in a moment, you just heard like an amazing speech or an amazing class, and you're like on a high, and all you could think of is like, really, really holy stuff. And someone comes and, tries to hand you a really good burger and says, come on, taste this burger. It's really good. And you're like, whoa, like not now. Like this doesn't fit in this moment. Like right now is all about spirituality. Think of it as someone who's always living in that inspired moment. So for the tzaddik, when the tzaddik sees a good juicy burger or some other really good food, whatever it is that talks to most people, they don't have any interest in it. It like doesn't even take up space. This person is so inspired and so focused on holiness that anything that's not holy is like whatever. I have no interest. Now, why is it that we're made to take an oath that we will be a tzaddik and not be a rasha? That we have to hold on to that thought. Because ultimately what the Tanya tells us is that this level is not really a level attainable for most people. For most people, it's not attainable. It's not our goal. I am not trying to get rid of any desire for negativity inside me. But I need to know that this level does exist. And the Tanya is going to describe to us that there are very few people in every generation that were kind of chosen for the mission of having this position, that they have the ability to do this. Most people are not aspiring to this. Why do we need to know about it? Because what do they say? Context is everything. Trying to understand who I am and where I'm trying to go, I also need to understand who I'm not and where I'm not trying to go. And I know we've discussed this before, but so many times we beat ourselves up about, why am I always wanting to do that thing? I know it's wrong. I should know better. Why do I always want to do it? Why am I always thinking about, X, Y, and Z? And the Tanya says, because the only one who never has these thoughts and desires and urges is a tzaddik. And that's not within our reach. Now, to clarify, the Tanya discussed this earlier, but there are two ways to define tzaddik, tzaddik, rasha, and benoni. There's the way the Tanya defines it, and then there's the way it's defined in the world. When someone says, oh, he's such a tzaddik, she's such a tzaddik, such an amazing righteous person, that's used as an adjective to describe someone, right? To describe that it's a really good person, it's a really great person. And that's fine. But the Tanya says we're trying to understand the ultimate meaning of like the absolute tzaddik, not the relative tzaddik. Usually when you describe someone as a tzaddik, it's like relative to everyone around them, they're a tzaddik. Even the Torah tells us about Noah, Noah who built the ark. It says Noah was a tzaddik in his generation. In his generation, he was a tzaddik compared to the other people in his generation. He was a really good guy. You would have placed him in another generation, maybe it wouldn't be such a big tzaddik. So typically when we use the term a righteous person, it's kind of relative to the surroundings. And the Tanya is trying to define the absolute meaning of tzaddik. So just not to get confused, when we say being a tzaddik is not attainable, being a great person is attainable to everybody. We're all capable of achieving great things. But in the Tanya's definition of an absolute tzaddik, that would be someone who has completely eradicated any negativity inside them. Their godly soul has completely conquered their animal soul or their natural soul, and all their desires are godly. And that's a very unique position to be in. Now the Tanya differentiates. The Tanya tells us the tzaddik absolutely will never act upon anything negative. Not only that, the tzaddik has managed to eradicate a lot of the negativity within him or her. Meaning, inside of the tzaddik, if we say that everyone has a godly soul and an animal soul, the tzaddik basically has just godly soul, or mostly godly soul. And like the animal soul has been kind of banished, put to sleep, mostly gone. But here the Tanya is going to differentiate and say, within the tzaddik, you can have two levels. You can have someone who's completely and absolutely banished every last bit of negativity inside them. That means the animal soul is basically totally gone. It's like they've got a hollow section inside them that's, where the animal soul used to be. And then you have the tzaddik who has mostly banished the negative, but not fully banished it. Now remember, it's not action. In action, this person still, from the outside, they look the same. They're both acting perfectly. But on the inside, the negative emotions, all of the desires that come from the animal soul. So a tzaddik has either fully gotten rid of it or partially to mostly gotten rid of it. The average person has not gotten rid of it at all. The average person is never going to control the urges that come up for them. And we'll read it inside soon, but the Tanya says, how does someone know if they've completely eradicated that negativity inside them? It says because if they completely eradicated the negativity inside them, they'll become, I know we used not a great word last time, but they'll become like turned off by negativity. They'll become disturbed by negativity. Meaning they're so sensitive because there's no ounce of negativity inside them that when they see something negative, let's not even talk about negativity. Let's talk about materialism. We say that tzaddik is only godly soul, only wants godliness. What happens when the tzaddik sees the burger, a really good one, right? I don't know why I'm saying burger. I don't even like burgers, but let's think of a food that, most people really like. Now, the tzaddik sees this food. Absolutely, the tzaddik is not interested, like not pulled towards it. The difference is the tzaddik, one of these guys is going to say, oh, a burger, how awful. Like, I would never want that. It's almost like despicable to them. They're repulsed by it. And the other one says, a burger, I don't know. I don't care for it. You see the difference? Neither of them cares for it. One of them is actually repulsed by it. And the Tanya says the one who's repulsed by it is because they've completely eradicated any animalistic desires from inside them, that the complete absence of the negative desires inside them makes them repulsed by that item. Now, God forbid, they're not repulsed by people who are eating this food. They're not it doesn't bother them what other people do. It's just saying that materialism irks them. It bothers them. They see it as just a disturbance and they're not interested in it. I know that was a lot. There's a lot more, but let's stop for questions and thoughts as we, try to paint a picture of who this tzaddik is. Lorraine, you wanted to say something?
So I don't know why, and maybe it's just the example, but why would we want to be repulsed by food? I mean, I think about Gandhi, who starved himself nearly to death for a reason, I don't know, 50 days or something crazy. And he was skin and bones and on his deathbed when, anyway, I don't know how that's a positive. I understand, like if you're repulsed by lashon hora, let's say, like a lot of women love to gossip and they love having the dirt on someone else. And I am trying not to. I wouldn't say I'm repulsed, but I would definitely say, I often say, oh, I'm trying not to talk about people. Like, somebody will be saying something and I'll try to shut it down. But I don't know. I don't know that that's something like can a human attain what you're talking about? It doesn't sound human.
So I'm so happy that you asked that because I want to clarify something. The repulsion that the tzaddik has is towards materialism for its own sake, for the sake of indulgence, not for a godly sake. Meaning the tzaddik has no problem, is very happy to partake in a meal for Shabbat, is very happy to eat, to have energy to serve God. But food for its own sake, for the sake of indulgence, or as a matter of fact, any materialism for its own sake, that's what repulses the tzaddik. So yes, you're right. The tzaddik is not starving themselves, or, I mean, if there's no reason to eat for a mitzvah because it isn't Shabbat and they don't realize that they need energy in order to serve God, someone might have to remind them, hey, you gotta eat lunch or you're not gonna have energy to, do the next thing. But their head is not in it. They don't get excited by anything that's materialistic unless there's a holy element to it. So if you bring them a, beautiful food platter and you say, this is, in honor of today's Rosh Chodesh, and we're going to eat this meal in honor of Rosh Chodesh, or I know that you're about to go pray and him bringing you this wonderful food so that you have energy to pray, they'll be very happy to partake in that. And the other piece that you said is it's not human. You're right. It's still not really a human thing. And the Tanya is giving us this ideal, but it's also telling us it's not an ideal you're striving for. And that's why this is the only chapter in the Tanya really dedicated to describing the tzaddik. The Tanya is called the book of the in-betweener, the book of the Benoni. It's not written for the tzaddik. Like the Tanya is basically saying, if you're one of these people, this book's not for you. Because 99% of humanity is not there, and that's not our mission. That's not why we were put into this world. What were we put into this world? What does God expect of us? Well, now we have to wait till chapter 12, because chapter 10 is going to outline the highest ideal, the tzaddik. Chapter 11 is going to describe the lowest ideal, the rasha. And then from chapter 12, we're going to start talking about the main character of the Tanya, which is the Benoni, which is what the Tanya is trying to get us to strive to be.
So does Judaism believe that there are that level? Like, I mean, I've heard the thing that in every generation there's 13 or 16. I don't know. It's a very little number because considering there's millions of people.
So the Tanya says, yes, in every generation there are a few. These are predetermined, as in these souls are sent down to the world for a different mission than most people, and they have different capacities than most people. Now, if the incomplete tzaddik, the one who has kind of eradicated some of the negativity, but not fully eradicated it, that there's a few more. The perfect tzaddik, the one that has completely eliminated any and all negativity, that's only one in a generation. And again, their purpose of even being in this
world. And do we know who they are? Like,
so sometimes we do, like Moses. Moses and his generation, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
But Moses killed someone. How is he so perfect? Moses killed someone. So you have
to study. Like we said, context is everything. You have to study, when you study the Torah portion with the deeper Kabbalistic interpretation, then these things become clarified. But Moses is brought down as basically as perfect as a human being can be. He's definitely the epitome of a tzaddik, as is, Rabbi Akiva, as is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as is, there are certain characters in throughout the generations that were known to be the tzaddik of the generation. I see a lot of hands. Gail, and then we'll go to Arlene.
Okay, so first of all, I want to know, do you have to be Jewish to be a tzaddik?
That's a good question. The Tanya is specifically talking to the Jewish population and talking about the Jewish family of souls. So non-Jews have souls as well. Their souls are of a different breed than the Jewish soul. The Tanya tells us clearly that being Jewish is a soul identity. And so the Tanya is specifically talking to the Jew and what the Jew's goals and aspirations are. So there are definitely righteous among the nations. There are definitely Gentiles who achieve great things, but they're on a different scale. They're in a different life mission and purpose.
Okay, I kind of understand that. The other question I had was, so what I hear you saying today is that the Tzaddik, or the righteous person, has totally put down the animal soul, has vanquished it. But then before I thought you said the animal soul was neither good nor bad. But now it seems like you're saying it's evil. So I'm confused about that.
Okay, that's great. I'm so happy you asked that. So we said the animal soul is not neither good nor bad. However, all neutral behaviors come from the animal soul, and all negativity also comes from the animal soul, meaning it could be channeled in one direction or the other. Any desire that I have for just indulgence, self-indulgence, that's not bad. It just indulgence in self comes from the animal soul, as well as any desire that I have for negativity, because ultimately the desire for negativity is kind of a higher level of a desire for self-preservation. Meaning when somebody has a desire to cheat on someone else, it's not because I want to cheat someone else. It's because I'm trying to do what I want to do for myself. I need more money. I want more money. I need to succeed. That person's presence bothers me. It all comes from the ego. And the center of all of that ego is the animal soul. So yes, the animal soul is in and of itself not negative, but it is the source for all negativity. So when the tzaddik gets rid of their animal soul, so this is where there's that unique difference. Either he kind of really quiets it and puts it to sleep so that he doesn't have any desires coming from it, and anything that the animal soul does, like allowing him to eat and function, is all being channeled through the godly soul, because he's doing all of these things only for a godly reason. So when this person eats, when this person sleeps, when this person goes to work, when this person exercises, it's absolutely all coming from a desire to connect to godliness. Now, what we didn't discuss much is that the perfect tzaddik who has completely eliminated the animal soul, basically in all the negativity of the animal soul, what happens then is that the animal soul flips and now serves the godly soul. It's like if we go back to the example of two kings fighting over a city. So in one example, the king wins, and now all the people who are not of my country, they need to stay in their houses locked up. They can never be seen in the streets. A higher level of victory is when the winning king not only makes the enemy stay in their houses and be quiet and never heard of, but he gets all of the enemy people to now work for him and to be part of the victorious team. So in the perfect tzaddik, when the godly soul is so successful at completely banishing the animal soul, it transforms the animal soul into basically another godly soul. And the Tanya is going to describe it later in this chapter, like how's it possible? If it's a negative energy, how does it suddenly become positive energy? The secret lies in the fact that it's not actually negative energy. It's really kind of that part of energy that's, could be channeled one way or another. But yeah, that's going to be later on in this chapter. Did I answer your question?
I'll probably have to learn more about it, but it's a start. It's
Okay.
very complex.
Yes, Arlene.
It seems as though the focus of the tzaddik when he is able to achieve all that would make him a tzaddik is very much internal and his. How does that translate into doing for somebody else? How does him being a tzaddik enhance the world? Or, it just seems like it's a very self-fulfilling kind of thing.
I hear what you're saying. The tzaddik is basically because completely the opposite of ego. They're completely and totally subservient to God. So the tzaddik doesn't
Him and God.
yeah, doesn't
The
have
tzaddik and God.
yes. So the tzaddik doesn't have, his or her own will anymore. The tzaddik only wants what God wants. So anything that tzaddik does now, they basically become an extension of godliness. They'll only do things that God wants them to do. They'll only act on things that God wants them to act on. So while what's happening in the tzaddik is very internal, the fact that they overpowered their animal soul and their animal desires, that's internal. No one sees that. No one knows that from the outside. But the tzaddik themselves, they're doing only good in the world. I would actually argue later, the Tanya argues and says that in a way that tzaddik's missing out because they don't have the opportunity to battle darkness. It's only the rest of us who get to battle the darkness in this world and slowly but surely, bring light into the darkest places. The tzaddik doesn't have any negative desires, doesn't want to, at some point the tzaddik battled and then they won the battle. And now this tzaddik is just, only wants good things. There's actually a tremendous benefit that we have, although it seems, it's hard, it's not easy, but we actually have the ability, the responsibility, and the opportunity to work in the darker places and bring light to those places. The tzaddik doesn't even interact with those places.
But by virtue of being a tzaddik, does that mean that their behavior translates into things that are beneficial to others, that are
100%, because a tzaddik has no sense of self. My entire sense of self comes from my animal soul, my animal, the animal part of me is the part of me that thinks of me, that wants what's good for me. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I want to succeed, I want to do well, I want to have more money. As soon as you take away that I, then the tzaddik is only doing for what God wants a tzaddik to do. The real question is, though, why do we talk so much about the tzaddik? I mean, what if we would have spent 2 lines talking about the tzaddik? If anyway, tzaddik is not relevant to us. And why are we spending a whole chapter on this tzaddik that apparently is not even attainable to us? And one of the commentaries on Tanya tells us that the reason we spend time talking about the tzaddik, although it's not attainable to us to become a tzaddik in everything, we all have those areas of our lives that we could achieve tzaddik status in. Tzaddik status means not only I always do the right thing, but I manage to work on myself enough that I don't even desire the negative thing. And doing that for small areas of our lives, that is attainable. So let's take an example. Somebody who, let's say they're 45 years old and they're learning about the concept of kosher for the first time. They never kept kosher in their lives. So they started off at a level where they never did it, right? That's like the lowest level. They never did, what God's will. They didn't know about it. They didn't know any better. They decide that they want to start keeping some kosher. So they're starting to work their way up. First, it's a constant battle. Now that they're aware of it, it's a constant battle inside them. I want it, but I don't want it, but I know it's the right thing, but it's too difficult. And they're battling it out. Most of the time, they're still not doing kosher. Some of the time, they're succeeding. That's, one level. They keep working on themselves. They get to the point, which we'll discuss in chapter 12, the Benoni level is where they're always making the right decision. Their actions externally are always perfect, but the battle internally never goes away. So this person, after a long time of working on themselves, is now eating 100% kosher. But every day, there's a battle inside them. Oh gosh, every time they're in the supermarket, passing that particular thing, I remember how good that thing is. Maybe just this time, what difference is it going to make? And then they say, nope, not going to do it. And they don't break. They're always doing the right thing. They've achieved Benoni status in the kosher department. How do they achieve tzaddik status in the kosher department? They start working on themselves to eliminate the desire for the non-kosher. Obviously, that goes through studying as they sit and they study and they understand what is it about kosher that's so good for my soul, and why does God care about this, and what difference does it make to me and to my mission in life. And they, they spend time, and typically it's the Kabbalistic teachings and the Hasidic teachings that really help give you that feel for it. And they study about it enough that they reach a point where they're like, you know what? They pass by that aisle in the supermarket or the, restaurant or whatever it is, and they're like, you know what? I don't even want it anymore. Like, I've overcome that. Oh, wow. They've now achieved incomplete tzaddik status, where they're no longer desiring it. It's still there. They could kind of recognize, what it is, but they don't want it. Then one day they pass by that same aisle and they say, can't believe I ever used to eat that. They're like repulsed by it. Not, God forbid, by people who eat it. It's not about people. This is about things, right? They look at that stuff and they say, I can't believe I ever used to eat this. They find it repulsive. They have now achieved complete tzaddik status in that particular department. So while it's not attainable for the average person to become a complete tzaddik in everything and all, but we all have those parts of our lives that we can work on ourselves to become just a little more sensitive to maybe quell that desire. Although desires and urges will always be there, in some places we can always also work on those desires and the urges. Thoughts, questions, comments? Yes, Harriet.
Okay, I understand taming the animal soul in an example like that. But I also thought that you said the animal soul was kind of the get up and go. It was the thing that was kind of the motivator, or the thing that without the animal soul, that we could just very easily just be, and maybe just would be study Torah, but I thought that was like the kind of the get up and go that allowed us, helped us, forced us to
So
do things that maybe we didn't want to do.
So definitely the animal soul is, if I had to describe one as fire and one as water, the animal soul is much more of the fire. The animal soul is much more connected to emotions. It's impulse, it's desire, it's, there's a lot of passion there. The godly soul is more of an intellectual soul, right? Because it comes more from understanding, right? Like we said, most people don't like, oh my God, I have an urge to go pray. No, I know praying is the right thing, and I've worked on myself to the point that I recognize that this is what I need to do, and that's going to lead my emotions. But the godly soul itself is a much calmer, more intellectual soul, which is why, Harriet, the ideal when a person is able to, when that tzaddik not just quells the animal soul, but is able to harness the animal soul and get the animal soul on board, then they have more fire in their service of God. So I would say that the person who has, the person who's just kind of quieted the animal soul and they're praying, maybe not with so much fire, but like they're praying because it's the right thing to do. And even though I really want to do something else now, I know this is what I need to do, right? They're like very focused on, I'm winning this battle. The person who manages now to overcome even the animalistic desire to do something else and to take that desire and get that desire on board, they're now praying with so much more fire and fervor, because even their animal soul now wants to pray. It's like I got the people from the other side on my team, and it's with so much more fire. And the interesting ending to that is that Kabbalah teaches us that when the person has come the perfect tzaddik, who has completely harnessed the animal soul, they kind of go back to that peace. Because there's nothing, the fire has already calmed down as well. And there's no fight anymore. There's nothing they're trying to fight against. Meaning if you saw two people praying, one of them with tremendous, they're shuckling and they're, praying back and forth. Now, typically that person is they're battling something inside, because there's a part of them that says, no, I want to do something else. And they're like, no, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to just focus on my prayer. The perfect tzaddik who has achieved that level where they've completely eradicated that from inside them, they'll typically appear much calmer, which is, not most of us. It's pretty difficult when you're really, really trying to focus in prayer. It's pretty difficult not to move because we're focused on trying to keep our thoughts in the right place. But that was an interesting piece, but I'm happy you brought that up. The Tanya is going to explain now, how's it possible then, how's it possible to take an animal soul and harness it to godliness? Because I'm going to take your question in a second, Lorraine. Ultimately, what the Tanya says, the animal soul, the way I always understood it is, think of it as just like a ball of desire. Just desire, like that magnet, Now, whatever's covering it is what it's going to desire. If it's covered with materialism, it's going to desire that materialism. If I peel back the materialism, then that ball of desire is going to desire whatever it sees. If I surround it with just godliness and holiness, then I could get that desire on board with my pursuit of godliness. Because ultimately, the animal soul in and of itself comes from klipas noga. It comes from that neither negative nor positive part of klipa. It's just kind of there. It's just the other side. It's not holiness. I could take it and harness it and use it for holiness. Or God forbid, I could do the opposite. Yes, Lorraine.
So you said something about overcoming, and it made me think of the example of Moses. So before, you had talked about that that we overcoming things are so much higher level than angels, because angels are just, they're elevated and spiritual and they don't have that side to overcome. So the idea of us versus angels and Moses overcoming and releasing his animal soul, which so clearly was a part of his earlier life, and then becoming this insane leader and this person that was able to save the Jewish people and receive the Ten Commandments. And so he basically is the example that you're showing now of someone who had this animal side and was able just to subjugate it and give his entire being over to God. So is that why he's at that level?
So I'm not sure if I understand your question, but someone like Moses was born with a soul of a different brand, so to speak. Like his soul had the ability to attain the level that he attained because he had a mission that was unique to him. The Jewish people needed a Moses type of leader who's going to do what Moses did, which the average person would not be able to do. So Moses had to be Moses. Like he had to live up to this expectation. You and I have to live up to what's expected of us. 99% of humanity is not expected to be Moses.
So according though to Tanya, and using Gail's question earlier, would Jesus be considered a tzaddik because he was Jewish and he had this huge mission and he spread this word? I mean, so
But the
would he?
mission, which the mission is as described by the Torah. He didn't follow the Torah. he went against the Torah. He was considered a heretic by the Jewish leaders.
Oh, okay, never mind. Gail, I was trying to work off your idea.
Meaning he was a Jewish person, yes. He had the ability to, you know, I don't know, at least to be what we all are striving to be, which is the Benoni, that in-betweener.
Okay.
It's interesting. One example that when we talk about the tzaddik, how much the tzaddik is or isn't like repulsed by negativity, I find it interesting. It seems like the Tanya is kind of giving us a message of, you want to know where you're at, see what things bother you. If certain things don't really bother you, even though they're negative, it might be telling you something about yourself and where you're at. So, for example, we hear of different negative things. Some things we hear of and we're like, oh my goodness, never, right? And some things we hear of and we're like, yeah, that's wrong, but it was also cute. Let's say, so for the first example, right? You hear of, I mean, we don't have to look too far, but people who would take other humans as hostages and, make awful videos about them to put online and share with their family. And you say, what, like, that is so evil. Like, how does such evil even exist, right? We hear it, we think about it. I imagine I'm speaking for all of us. We're just so repulsed by the evil, the ability of someone to even do something like that. Then we hear about, some folk tale of some, crazy hero who went around, killing people, and we're like, yeah, killing is awful. But it's a cool story. Sometimes you hear of like a story and you're like, yeah, of course, I'd never do that. But like, interesting. Or let's not take a killing story. Let's take a dishonesty story, right? You hear somewhere in the news about somebody who was, really dishonest and managed to, I'm thinking now of a story. A few years ago, there was, I hope I'm not messing it up, but so somebody showed me a write-up about this. Some person went and opened up an imaginary restaurant somewhere in Europe, and they created an online entity for themselves, and they managed to get people to write some really, really good reviews. And I don't remember how it snowballed, but they basically got the whole world like trying to make reservations at this restaurant that didn't actually exist. And people would call to make reservations and they'd be like, oh yeah, we're booked out for the next, 4 months, can I? And then they would take their reservation for, who knows in how long. And the person would be like, oh my God, I got this reservation at this amazing restaurant that the whole internet's, reviewing. And then ultimately the few people that they took in, like this guy, like at some point he realized he has to allow people to come to the restaurant before they figure it out. So he transformed like his backyard into nothing great, but like put out some lights and like, put together some food. And it was like, I don't know, it was like ramen and tuna fish, like, nothing, nothing really great. But the person would come, they waited for this experience for 4 months and they're paying crazy amounts of money to come. And they're sitting on this, wooden chair in the guy's backyard and he's serving them this food. And like, their mind's playing games on them. They think they're eating at this really exquisite, exclusive restaurant and whatever. Eventually the person was busted. But I remember reading the story and learning about the story. And if you ask me, I will tell you in a second, of course, that's an awful thing to do. You're robbing people. You're fooling people. You're taking people's money without giving them what they really should be getting for their money. I think this person's totally dishonest. At the same time, I get a real kick out of the story. I think this person's a genius, and I'm fascinated by how this person was able to take, to play on people's minds like that. Again, I'll tell you 100%, it's an awful thing that they did. But somehow, and maybe it's just me, I'm not repulsed by the story. The same as if I'd hear of somebody who, robbed a poor person and, took all their money and left them in the street with nothing to eat. So what the Tanya seems to be saying is that when something repulses me, that means I've completely gotten rid of that inside of myself. The tzaddik, when the tzaddik sees things that are evil or things that are just indulgent, the tzaddik says, "Ugh, like that's awful," because the tzaddik has completely eliminated that part inside of them. The tzaddik who's an incomplete tzaddik doesn't care for materialism, but it doesn't repulse them because they still have a little bit inside them, even if it's, asleep. So, that gives me a lesson. Like when I see things that I know are not good, but it doesn't absolutely bother me, then there's probably some of that on some level inside me. Not that I would have necessarily go ahead and do it, but maybe I could, theoretically justify some version or element of it. Perhaps if I was in a situation where somebody was trying to do X and I knew that they deserved it and I knew that they didn't care and I knew that then maybe I would theoretically come to an action that might be similar to that. Meaning when I'm not repulsed by an action, it tells me that I haven't fully gotten rid of that inside me. We live in a society today that everyone's very focused on being very accepting of everyone else, and we should be. But that doesn't mean that we should not be bothered by actions that we know are wrong. Because being bothered by actions is not the same as being judgmental of people. Being judgmental of people is never okay. But if I really care for truth and for good, then when I see something that's really against truth and is really negative, that should bother me. I should feel repulsed when I see that this thing is so, around and so rampant, which is what the chapter is telling us about the tzaddik. The perfect tzaddik is completely subservient to godliness. Anything that's not godly bothers this person. Again, it doesn't mean that this person is going and yelling at people and telling them what to do. Not at all. But inside, if I have a moral compass, then I should be bothered when I see something wrong. And if I'm not bothered by it, then I need to look inside and say, wait a second, what's going on inside me that when I see something that I know is absolutely negative, it doesn't bother me that that thing exists in God's world. Thoughts, questions, comments before we wrap up? Lorraine, you look like you have a lot to say. I'm not sure if you're agreeing or you're disagreeing.
So, well, I'm going to be quiet and let Sarah. Sarah, you had your hand up for like a long time, so
Oh,
you go
that's
first.
true.
You go first, and then I'll ask my question because I feel like I've talked a lot.
Yeah, but it's after 9, so maybe I should hang on to it for next time.
No, I'm dying to know. Because next time we're going to be on a whole different chapter. So what was your question or comment? Say it quick.
Okay. Uh, no, it's not a quick one. It's a lot more lengthy. So I'll save it for another time, but thank you.
Okay, so if we're going to sum up this chapter in a nutshell, we're still not talking about what's expected of us. We're kind of drawing out this ideal persona of the tzaddik, so we kind of know where we position ourselves. We could ask ourselves, why would the Tanya take 12 chapters to get to the point, basically? It's only in chapter 12 that the Tanya actually starts outlining what is expected of someone who's striving to be a Benoni, an in-betweener. And I don't know if I have the perfect answer for it, but I definitely think that one of the things that it seems that Tanya is doing is that Tanya is trying to make us really be thoughtful about this journey, about this process. It's not, Tanya could have said, all right, I'm here to answer all your questions. Here are all the issues people have with life. Here are all the solutions. If you struggle with, anxiety, do X. If you struggle with sadness, do B. If you struggle with, certain parts of the Torah, do C. Tanya doesn't do that. Tanya slowly tries to give us like a world perspective. Start looking at the world in a different way. And then as we start, drawing out this picture, we start thinking, wait, okay, so then where am I there? And what does that say about me? And by the time we get to chapter 12, we're actually talking about the Benoni, we're at a place where we're more ready to hear, all right, so now what do I need to do? So today was chapter 10, the ideal of the tzaddik. Next week is going to be chapter 11, which is the opposite of a tzaddik, the Rasha. This is basically the person who fails the war. If the tzaddik is completely victorious, the Rasha fails and is unsuccessful, and his animal soul is just running rampant. And then chapter 12 is what we're striving for, the Benoni, which is the person he's fighting the battle, or she's fighting the battle every day, but winning every battle. But then there's another battle, and then there's another battle. This person never reaches a place where, okay, no, it's like the addict who's always in recovery. But that, the Tanya is going to describe to us, that's where the beauty lies. Because the beauty is not in not having struggles. And the beauty is obviously not in giving up and saying, forget it, I'm not even going to try. The beauty is in going through the struggle and constantly making those right choices every time. That we'll talk about more when we get to discussing the Benoni. Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful week. If you're in the DFW area, stay safe and warm and don't lose power. Also, if you're not in the DFW area, stay safe and warm.
I was
and
just going
don't
to
lose
say that to
power.
Lisa. They're about to get hit by such a storm. Oh my
really?
God.
Where is Lisa?
Connecticut.
Oh,
Lisa, what
But-
kind of storm are you guys expecting? Oh, her audio's not working. Yeah.
No, but Virginia, New York, and Connecticut. You're not in on that storm that's coming to New York? No? Okay, never mind. She can't talk.
All right. Good.